Hello and welcome to another video on fun facts from GTA San Andreas, in which I'll present to you various hidden gems, details, or glitches, which I reckon aren't much known. Today, we kick off with a speed trick. And no, I do not mean the tapping method, although something related. About that one, most of you probably know already anyway. In short, tapping is actually sort of a glitch. In theory, this made sense. CJ bends on a motorcycle, thus removing the air resistance, so he's able to drive faster, and that worked well, but mainly on controllers. There, we were able to just slightly push the analog to maintain the right position. The problem started on PC. Keyboards mostly do not support pressure-sensitive keys, especially not back in 2005. A key is either pressed or it's not. So in order to achieve the same effect, players began to just spam the up arrow key, and it turned out to work even better. However, that method isn't the limit. There's still something stronger. In comes something, which I call the extreme wheelie. What I mean by that is to pull the motorbike's rear wheel so high that it grinds against the asphalt. It looks absurd, sounds even worse, but it's generally possible. And now, the best part. While we're performing such a wheelie, we apply the tapping method, and that combination must be causing some kind of short circuit in the engine because our motorcycle begins to gain speed very quickly, even quicker than with the tapping alone. The difference is noticeable, which is best to be observed on the comparison on the screen. Another bit of magic happens with police helicopters. Let's assume we've got 3 wanted stars. We're being chased with a helicopter and we destroy it with, let's say, a minigun. And then, if we type in the cheat code AEZAKMI, so the code which disables the wanted level, pure comedy kicks off. The helicopter begins to fly away, still exploding every now and then, until it despawns and it goes out of our sight. The same happens if instead of the police cheat code, we type in the sandstorm cheat code. The effect remains identical. A helicopter flying away in explosions. Why does this happen? Well, the script responsible for the heli's escape apparently doesn't check if the heli is functional. After all, in GTA SA, if we shoot down a helicopter, it doesn't get fully destroyed until it touches the ground. So the game reads it as if the heli is destroyed and the explosion effects are triggered. But at the same time, the game doesn't consider it as wrecked because it hasn't touched the ground and never finished its destruction procedure. Therefore, the script sees no issue whatsoever in commanding the helicopter with the escape function. And since that causes the heli to fly away from the ground, so it never touches it, the process remains active until the heli goes out of our sight. Many people are irritated with one serious oversight of Rockstar. It's about Caesar's gang being hostile towards CJ and his gang, regardless of the stage of the story and the relationship between CJ and Caesar. In other words, they're always trying to hound CJ out of their turf. Such images kill the immersion because it's ridiculous for our best friend soldiers to attack us. However, I gotta admit that Rockstar was very consistent with their messed up logic. That obviously leads to many absurdities. Cause if we drive on the turf of the Barrio Los Aztecas with Caesar, his gang will still attack CJ. After a while, it gets even funnier because Caesar will see his soldiers attacking CJ and will begin to defend him by attacking his own gang. In turn, the Aztecas will then begin to attack not only CJ, but also their own boss. A complete circus. And that's not even it, because the same happens in the case of Woozie and his triad. At least in this case, the triad won't attack CJ until he pulls off some madness on their turf first. But if we do initiate a conflict, then give it a few seconds and you'll often become a witness of a brawl between Woozie and his soldiers. The Ballas, who are trying to kill CJ in the first mission, are a good joke too. Apparently, there's some kind of imposters because other Ballas, for example those we find on the street, will often be hostile towards them. It doesn't make any sense, but from a technical standpoint, that's exactly how it was coded. See, each pet has its so-called pet type. For example, a prostitute, drug dealer, male civilian, female civilian, and various gangsters such as a Balla, a family's member, a Vago, and so on. The pet type tells a pedestrian how they should behave and how to react to specific events in the game world. For instance, the Ballas are coded to attack the families and the Vagos to fight the Aztecas. And the whole trick is that the developers didn't even give neither Woozie, Caesar, nor the Ballas from the first mission a suiting pet type. They also haven't set certain behaviors manually. This whole aspect was simply omitted, thanks to which the game doesn't even consider Caesar as a character friendly with the Aztecas, doesn't read Woozy as a member of the Triad, and doesn't consider the Ballas from the Big Smoke mission as actual Ballas. As a result, interactions of such characters with the usual pedestrians on the street often end up becoming completely illogical images like a Balla shooting another Balla. One of the good old fun facts is that we can find the vehicles in which we were arrested on the police's impound lots around the state. However, this mechanic has more to it than just that. There's also one thing about it, which I don't think many people know of. See, it turns out that the developers, in order to implement this mechanic, used a very similar function to the one handling the garages. Yes, those in which we can store vehicles. That's why we can actually use the impound lots the same way as the garages we often find next to our safe houses. It's kind of uncomfortable to get inside because you gotta first snatch a police car to get the gate to open. Yet that doesn't change the fact that we're able to do that. We can park our car there, save our progress, exit the game entirely, launch it anew, and our vehicle will still be there, waiting for us at the impound lot. You can store up to 3 vehicles per lot like that. Unfortunately, it also has its flaws. First of all, if we get arrested while having 3 cars stored at the lot, one of our current vehicles gets irreversibly replaced with the one we've just got arrested in. Often, it doesn't even take getting arrested for our vehicles to disappear. See, every time you enter the lot or you pass it by, the script of the lot will trigger, spawning not only our cars but also other cars. You know, those random cars parked around which create the location's ambiance. Unfortunately, it often occurs that those random cars spawn close to the place we'd made into our garage. The game needs to pick up to 3 vehicles to save and spawn later in that area. It often happens that it chooses those random cars around it rather than the ones we put there manually. This results in us losing our vehicles. In the mission's management issues and 555 we tip, we can make a bit of comedy. For the record, both of those missions have CJ using camouflage. He uses somebody else's car in order to be recognized as its owner. Of course, in both of those missions, the game doesn't allow for damaging the car, since that would blow our cover. It turns out, however, that the developers didn't think of everything. Essentially, we'll have the same circus as the one in the mission Trojan Voodoo in GTA Vice City. Remember how Tommy, in his Hawaiian shirt, along with a posse of Cubans dressed in their gang colors, drove onto the turf of a drug factory belonging to the Haitians? The Haitians hated the Cubans. They were lurking, hunting for them all day long, and would open fire at any sight of a Cuban. In that mission, the Haitians didn't spot anything suspicious. Right. After all, the Cubans entered the factory using truly brilliant camouflage, didn't they? It turns out that the developers didn't draw any conclusions from that mess while making GTA SA. See, in the 2 missions mentioned before, a player is free to use tuning garages. When it comes to management issues, it seems that the developers completely forgot about it. As much as the pay and spray was set to not change our car's color, the Transfender still offers a whole variety of paints. We can paint our car pink, change the wheels, add hydraulics, and trigger the mission marker with our suspension up, and nothing will happen. Mad Dog Security will not see anything out of the ordinary, and no one will suspect anything. On the other hand, in the mission 555 we tip, it seems at first as if the developers learned from their mistake. A visit at a pay and spray or a color change at a TF fails the mission right away. However, there's still a possibility to tune the attorney's car into Exhibit Speeds from Pimp My Ride. Unfortunately, the developers removed the tuned version of the car at the later stage of the mission. The attorney's car gets spawned from scratch, so the final cutscene has the boring version. Shame, really. It was a perfect opportunity for a funny alternative cutscene. You know, the attorney sees the state of his car and throws a humorous line, and the poor valet who brought it over has to explain himself. Sounds like an amusing idea, especially that Rockstar likes implementing alternative cutscenes, like in the mission Stowaway. This was just another perfect opportunity for that. In the last episode, we observed images which were a living proof of the fact that San Andreas has unlimited possibilities. Today, I've also got something of that sort to show you. You need to get a heat-seeking rocket launcher and jump onto a cargo train. Then, wait for it to get some speed. Then, we aim with the launcher and wait until it locks onto the train. So we wait for the green blip to turn red. We fire a rocket and just observe. The rocket will be moving at a very similar speed as the train, so we'll be able to travel side by side. The effect is also achievable on the freeway in Las Venturas. While we're standing on top of a moving vehicle, we fire a rocket at a car in front of us. Then, the rocket also travels right next to us in a beautiful way. In the mission Los Sepulcros, we drive to the cemetery with Sweet, where the Ballas are holding a funeral for one of their OGs. The plan is to mess it up and erase everyone there. What's interesting, Rockstar spawned the Ballas there before we hit the marker next to the cemetery. That's not really in their style because it's easier to spawn an ambiance of the place only when it's actually necessary. Spawning it earlier requires additional work and making sure that a player won't be able to mess the ambiance up before it's necessary. Exactly. It turns out that before we hit the marker, we can come up to the Ballas and join their grieving over the dead OG. The Ballas, in this whole atmosphere of grief and despair, apparently forgot about their hatred towards CJ and became peaceful and merciful. And as much as attacking the Ballas will result in a mission failure, there is a way to kill all of them off and continue the mission. All it takes is to accelerate a vehicle at the Ballas and bail out before it hits them. Then the Ballas would take damage and we won't fail the quest. The situation is similar with the police. If we manage to get a wanted level and we use our Ballas as living shields from the policeman's bullets, we can also kill them before we trigger the cutscene. I mean, as long as we make it before the time limit runs out, which can be pretty problematic because it's not like we got all day for that mission. In any case, it's another hilarious way to break any logic in a mission in the game. If you've got more of those, let me know in the comment and we'll test them out in the future videos. Inspired by your suggestions, I went back to a certain trick, which a lot of us may remember from GTA Vice City. In that game, we could do something very funny. All it took was to pause the game and begin spamming a given code. Upon resuming gameplay, it turned out that every single instance of the cheat code has been registered. The effect? Tank fountains, chain explosions, and complete chaos on the streets. The issue was fixed along with GTA San Andreas, so the usual cheat stacking doesn't work here anymore. However, someone suggested a very interesting idea in a comment. The pause menu was fixed. Right, but what about the replays? Now that function is known to be very glitchy in San Andreas. What if we trigger a replay and then spam the cheat codes? And then see if they all get applied after we turn off the replay. I decided to verify that, and the effect turned out to be better than I assumed. The cheats typed in while watching a replay do not only influence the actual game world, but also the one of the replay. For example, if we use the cheat code to explode all cars while watching a replay, the cars registered in a replay will explode. After leaving the replay, we'll see that the cars in the actual game world have nonetheless exploded. A similar case is with the maximum fat and maximum muscle cheat codes. The changes are applied both within the replay and in the actual gameplay. Thus, we can modify the CJ from the replay in that way, and the effects will also stay with us in the actual gameplay. It's even more bizarre with spawning vehicles. Vehicles spawned during a replay appear within the replay. They'll also be transferred into the real world of the game. That all suggests that the replays aren't an isolated mode in San Andreas. The game simulates replays in the same instance of the world, in which the usual gameplay is going on. The gameplay layer gets paused and hidden, and the game loads in the replay's data. After it's done, the elements of the replay get removed, the gameplay layer resumed, and the control over our character restored. Not all mechanisms were disabled during a replay though, therefore some cheat codes create a sort of a bridge between those two layers. On a side note, I also discovered that a replay can save us from dying under a tram's wheels, so there's a useful bonus fact for you. If you can think of other cheat codes which would be worth checking out, let me know. I've got a feeling that this phenomenon can lead to some wild effects.